Spider-Man Miles Morales is probably the best example in recent superhero media of the concept of the hero's journey, which is essentially the struggle that a character goes through that shapes their heroism and their outlook on the world going forward. This game highlights Miles' first steps into becoming the Friendly Neighbourhood Spider-Man, and even though he shares his title with Peter, their journeys into the role couldn't be more different. Spider-Man Miles Morales is chock full of beautiful character moments, tragedies, action set pieces, parallel storytelling, but most importantly in my opinion, Miles Morales is a game full of inspiring bravery. Yes, I'm aware that it's just a video game, and I know I'm prone to being quite dramatic in my analysis of these games, but to me, Spider-Man is the pure embodiment of bravery. This is a character that as a kid taught me a lot of things about doing the right thing and always standing for what is right no matter the consequences. So it's beautiful that Miles Morales can now teach this lesson to children of new generations, of all colours and creeds. Hell, you don't even have to be a child to learn something from Spider-Man. We could all take after that selfless nature, helping others and making it our duty as people to be kind. Spider-Man Miles Morales is an amazing start to this PS5 generation, and to be honest, I'm so glad that Miles got his own game. I'm loving all of the appreciation for Miles as a character that he's got over the last few years, not only from the Spider-Verse film, which was absolutely fantastic, but also from this new game. I would even go as far to say that this is one of the greatest Spider-Man stories ever told, as it covers a lot of the more important conventions of Spider-Man as a character, and what it means to be Spider-Man. I think if anything, this game proves that you don't have to don tight spandex or a mask to be a hero, but instead, that hero resides somewhere within all of us, and anyone can unlock it when the need be. To some, this may seem quite a cheesy sentiment, and that's fair enough, but to me, as a kid, the idea of Spider-Man was so much more than a man swinging around New York City. To me, Spider-Man represents the everyday person, going through struggles and just trying to live life as best they can. And I think Miles Morales takes this idea even further, proving that Spider-Man isn't just Peter Parker, but Spider-Man is the will to do whatever is right no matter the cost. And I think this reflects on a lot of people in the world today. Spider-Man is a reminder that there are still good people in this world, and I think that's why he's one of the greatest superheroes ever made. In this video, I'm going to do my best to highlight the journey that Miles goes on as a character, and exactly why Spider-Man is the best example of a superhero that there ever was and ever will be. Today, join me as we take a dive into what I think is the best Spider-Man game ever made. A game made with a love and passion that is rare to see in the industry these days, and a game that reminded me why Spider-Man is such an inspiring character in the first place. So before I start analysing the game, I think it's a good idea for me to explain exactly what the template of the hero's journey actually is. This is a concept you'll be very familiar with, as it's used very often in films, TV shows, books, and of course, video games. The hero's journey is a story structure identified by Joseph Campbell that covers all of the changes and transformations that a character will go through as a result of their specific journey. It's a really common convention that is used especially in modern movies, as it lends itself perfectly to media with a feature-length runtime. A few movies you may have watched that use the structure of the hero's journey are Harry Potter, Star Wars, The Matrix, Lord of the Rings, Avatar, The Dark Knight Trilogy, Iron Man, Lion King, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Finding Nemo, and of course, pretty much every modern Spider-Man film that has come out in the last 20 years. You may not have even realised, but these films and sometimes even series of films follow the conventions of the hero's journey. But what exactly are the stages of the hero's journey? Much like most blockbusters of the modern age, the hero's journey is split up into 3 acts. Act 1, Separation, Act 2, Initiation, and Act 3, Return. Act 1 always begins with the hero departing from normality. This is normally referred to as a call to adventure. We meet our hero in his or her world and experience a little bit of what life is normally like for this individual. As a result of the aforementioned call to adventure, this causes the hero to leave the ordinary, seeking this adventure as a result of a change in the dynamic of their life or the place they live. A lot of the time, this call to adventure is met with either indifference or refusal, most likely due to the character's initial cynical attitude or lack lack of belief in themselves. This lack of belief then leads the hero to some form of spiritual or mental teacher or guide that helps them seek their responsibility. This doesn't even have to be them meeting an individual that acts as a mentor. It can just be a significant event that inspires the hero with a newfound sense of resolve. At the end of this first act, the hero gains new allies, but they also make new enemies too, which sets the stakes for the coming acts. Act 1 serves as context as to what the main character's life was like before the events of the journey, as well as introducing us to the characters that will shape this journey. Act 2 is the section of the story in which the hero enters a world beyond their ordinary one, and discovers purpose through facing obstacles, villains, and deadly situations. But most importantly, the best hero's journey stories have a mirroring between the antagonist and the protagonist, which is one of the more important sides of the journey as it forces the hero to question their own beliefs. Act 2 has the character approaching the belly of the beast, which is essentially the most dangerous point in their journey in which they really get a taste of what they're up against. This is where the road of trial begins. From this point onward, the hero will be faced with almost unbeatable odds, although these odds won't come without progress or reward when overcome, as this opposition leads them further to their goal. This act usually features some form of temptation that tests the resolve of the hero, urging them to give in. At this point, the hero will be taken slightly off the beaten track of the journey, however there will be a realization that they need to fulfill the original call to adventure, which swerves the hero back on track, more determined than ever to reach their goal. This then leads to the final showdown, the climax of the story where the hero is forced to face the foe that has been eluding them this entire time. Defeating the great evil leads to the reward, which can be anything, as it's dependent on the character, their motivations, as well as the original reason for the journey in the first place. The hero is then driven to complete the adventure by returning to the ordinary world of normality that they started in, which leads us to the resurrection of the hero. Now, I don't mean this literally, even though the resurrection of a character can be literal in this context. This resurrection may be either literal or symbolical, but it serves as a way to show that the character is pure upon re-entering the ordinary world, and that it's almost as if the character wakes to a new world with a transformed life. And finally, Act 3 is the return, in which the hero returns triumphant, but most importantly, with a changed perspective on their life before the journey. This section of a hero's journey is known as the return with the elixir, as it symbolises their victory. The elixir in question is the reward or treasure that the hero sought on their journey, although the true reward of the journey is the perspective that the hero gains as a result of their adventure, which will help them against future adversity. The hero has successfully become the master of two worlds, and has fought for their freedom to live, and very often the freedom of others. And there you have it. That's a short explanation of the hero's journey and how each act serves as a way to progress the character to the next stage. The hero's journey is a tried and true formula of depicting a character's growth. This pattern of adventure and character transformation is a universal one that runs through all kinds of mythic traditions across the world. If you want a more in-depth analysis into the hero's journey, you can read The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell, which really goes into detail about this age-old method of storytelling. Now, with that out of the way, I think it's time I start analysing how exactly the hero's journey is used in Miles Morales, and how this structure makes the game one of the greatest Spider-Man stories ever told. We begin Miles' journey into becoming a hero in none other than the streets of Harlem, a very significant place for his character. This is where we get to see a glimpse of his ordinary life and who he is as a person, wandering through the streets, saying hello to everyone, and helping people along the way. This is Miles' life as he knows it now, and although he knows he has the powers of Spider-Man, along this journey he will discover the responsibility that these powers possess. This moment could be considered the calm before the storm, one of the many moments of peace before the world forces Miles to adapt, and adapt he will. There's also some nice symbolism at this beginning section through the mural of Spider-Man. At this point there is only Peter's Spider-Man depicted on the wall, as Miles has yet to make a name for himself in the city. This mural acts as an example of how even though Miles' Spider-Man is known, he isn't loved by the people, and that needs to change. The key to being the Friendly Neighbourhood Spider-Man is to win over the hearts of the people you are protecting. This is something that Miles will learn on his journey. Finally, after getting a message from Pete, Miles springs into action and dons his mask, excited for another opportunity to prove himself as Spider-Man. We meet Peter just behind a convoy headed to the raft. The two Spider-Men are serving as escorts for the shipment to make sure that it arrives at the raft safely. Seeing Peter and Miles interact as Spider-Men shows how their partnership has evolved since the City That Never Sleeps DLCs, in which Miles is very timid and awkward. He still is to an extent in this game, but he seems older and much more capable this time around. One of the cables from the container is damaged and Miles is eager to prove his abilities, so he takes point and attempts to web the cable together, which results in the cable coming loose again and the aircraft spinning out of control. This first failure is a sign of greater things to come. Just like Peter, Miles is making potentially life-threatening mistakes during the early days of his Spider-Man career. I think constant failure is almost a key trait of Spider-Man in a way. The ability to fail over and over again and still come out on top due to sheer willpower is something that we see a lot in Spider-Man, and Miles Morales is no different. This failure is made even more prominent when we realise that it has led to Rhino escaping his containment, as well as a bunch of prisoners that were headed for the raft. Miles' failure literally undoes Peter's work from the first game, as we know that Rhino was one of the Sinister Six from the first game. This failure is one of the many lessons that Miles will learn over the course of the game. This section of the game also introduces us as players to the combat system, which is something that the game kinda revolves around. I must say, I think Miles' combat is incredibly fun, and the new animation fits his character. He's definitely not as refined as Peter when it comes to fighting, which is reflected in the way he fights. I do overall prefer Peter's combat. I think the amount of gadgets he has is just brilliant and makes for some really fun combos. However, Miles' combat is fun for completely different reasons, as he boasts a variety of different gadgets and abilities that we unlock later on in the game. The two combat systems have the same core abilities: standard melee attacks, web striking, disarming, throwing objects, launching enemies, etc. But the unique abilities attributed to the two characters and their suits are very different. After taking down the enemies, Miles latches onto Rhino, who begins to rampage through the city, taking a detour through the nearby shopping centre. This is one of the nice set pieces of the game, which really showcases the hectic nature of being Spider-Man and how he saves people just before disaster. After smashing through the city, we reach some sort of industrial plant, hence why there's a massive tank of flammable gas. Rhino runs into the tank and sends an explosion through the area, blowing up the entire building, which could very well be an occupied building. Peter keeps Rhino occupied while Miles takes out more of the escaped raft convicts, but is eventually overpowered by Rhino, which means Miles has to step up. At this point in the game, Miles is very unsure of himself, but during this section, all he cares about is defending Peter and defeating Rhino. In his rage, Miles runs head on into Rhino and punches him. The punch sends shockwaves into the air, which introduces us to Miles' new power: Venom. No, not that Venom, but a type of bioelectricity unique to Miles and the spider that bit him. Venom is an entirely new gameplay mechanic, and it really is the meat and potatoes of the combat system in this game. I absolutely adore this ability. Once you fully upgrade Venom, you can string together all sorts of cool combos, and you can chain together Venom attacks to maximize the amount of damage you do to enemies in the area. It really is a beautiful ability. You can even use Venom outside of combat when swinging around. You can boost yourself in the air or forward to gain more momentum. It's really cool. Using his newfound abilities, Miles successfully takes down Rhino and saves Peter's life. This is Miles' first true victory as Spider-Man. He did this on his own and without the help of his mentor, although the whole victory is sort of soured when you realise that Miles caused this danger in the first place, and if he hadn't been so reckless, maybe Rhino wouldn't have escaped in the first place. Regardless, this serves as a taste of the potential of Miles and that he can in fact hold his own against some of Peter's oldest enemies. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Roxxon show up. This is the shady corporation of this game, sort of like Sable from the first game, although Roxxon are much more directly involved in the story. Out of one of the cars comes Simon Krieger, the CEO of Roxxon Energy and the lead man researching a power source called Nuform, a supposedly sustainable power source that can be used to power the entire city in an environmentally friendly way. Although he seems a little bit shady and a bit too nice. For example, why does he employ these heavy armoured super soldiers to just follow him around? Yes, Simon Krieger's a bad guy, but he isn't the main antagonist per se. To be honest, there is no main antagonist of this game. Really, it's more of a mixture between a few enemies that get in Miles' way in various different ways. We'll meet them later. For now, Miles and Pete swing off into the night to lick their wounds and celebrate their victory. This is one of my favourite scenes in the entire game, although I guess that is quite fitting as this scene signifies Miles' call to adventure. This is the moment in which Miles is forced to leave the comfort of his ordinary life. Peter is going on holiday with MJ for a few weeks, and so that leaves Miles as the only Spider-Man left to protect New York while he's gone. As is very common in the hero's journey, this call to adventure is met with refusal. Miles doesn't believe in himself because of his lack of experience as Spider-Man, although at this point, he doesn't know that he has the potential to be even greater than Peter. I really like this scene because it's simple but emotional. You can see that Peter and Miles have become good friends. They don't just work together, but they have each other's backs. Peter consoles Miles, telling him that he has a full belief that he will be okay, and that he will be able to handle himself. This gives Miles that small push to accept his newfound responsibility as New York's only Spider-Man. We receive a call from Ganke Lee, Miles' best friend. I like Ganke. I feel as if every young Spider-Man character should always have a best friend who's in on the Spider-Man secret, and Ganke fits this bill perfectly. Meeting up with Ganke, Miles tells him that Pete gave him a parting gift just before he left. Turns out this gift is a new suit. It isn't the iconic black and red Miles suit, but I actually really like the design of this red one. The red really pops, and it's definitely a step up from Miles' previous suit, which consisted of repurposed clothes and Spidey's old suit. Miles now has a spider suit to call his own, and it's nice that Pete went out of his way to make him a suit, even with his lack of money and little spare time. Although, the suit is only the first part of Pete's gift, there is another waiting for us at the next waypoint. Leaving Ganke in Central Park, we now swing to the next location to find the next part of the gift, holographic training. These training missions can be found all across the map. If you've played the first game, you may remember the combat, stealth and mobility Taskmaster challenges, or the screwball challenges from the DLC. This works pretty much exactly the same as those, although it has you test out Miles' abilities, of course. They're actually much better in this game. They improved on every aspect of this side content in my opinion. The missions are much more challenging in this game, and it was a pleasure going around the map and completing these activities to get the platinum trophy. The stealth missions were especially fun because Miles' gadgets and abilities are catered much more to stealth than Peter's were. Either that or the stealth system in Miles Morales has been tweaked slightly so that detection is a little less strict than the first game. Regardless, I think these missions are just good old-fashioned fun and give you a chance as the player to test your skills. As a result of completing these missions, they unlock a variety of extra skills that can be acquired through these missions, so the reward for completing them is very worth it. Ganke tips us off that someone is supposedly breaking into Roxxon Plaza, so Miles heads over there to check it out before heading home. Here we have some exposition about Newform and how it's going to improve the lives of those living in New York City. Simon Krieger seems quite sure that this is 100% the new sustainable source of energy. It seemingly has no downfalls and will do lots of good for Harlem. Heading into the building, we find out that the people breaking into Roxxon are no ordinary thieves, but instead a group of masked thugs wielding purple programmable matter weapons. These people are from a group called the Underground, and they have their hands in a lot of the criminal underworld of New York. We'll find out more about them later. What's evident about them now is that they're clearly very powerful, and they have these weapons that were clearly designed by some sort of mad genius. I mean, programmable matter is pretty much the nanotech that Tony Stark has on his suit in Avengers Infinity War, so whoever designed this is clearly very intelligent. Of course, fighting underground enemies means that we have a new enemy type to fight. The Underground are actually pretty fun to fight. If you play it on the harder difficulties, they're really difficult and offer a massive challenge, forcing you to use all of the abilities that are available to you, and I really appreciate this. I gotta say, on the harder difficulties, they are sort of like damage sponges, but on normal, I think they're perfectly balanced enemies. Right now, we're only introduced to a couple of the archetypes of underground enemies that are available in the game, but as we get further into it, they do unlock more archetypes, and there's some really interesting enemies out there that offer some quite interesting challenges. These enemies definitely keep you on your toes. Miles beats them, and we find out that they were tracking Newform shipments across the city. They want something to do with the Newform, but what and why? Those questions aren't to be answered now. It is Christmas Day after all, and Miles needs to get back home in time for Christmas dinner with Rio and Ganke. Miles arrives home and discreetly slips through the window and gets changed into his everyday clothes. The attention to detail in the new apartment is crazy, with interactable items scattered all over Miles' room and Rio's room. This interactivity really brings these areas to life and makes them feel lived in. It's some great character exposition told through environmental storytelling. There's also lots of optional dialogue with Ganke at this part. He's staying over for Christmas break, and there's something about the conversations they have that almost bring me back to the excitement of being in school and finally having a big chunk of time off to spend with friends. You can feel their excitement, it's written quite well. This part of the game also introduces us properly to Rio Morales, Miles' mother. I guess you could say she's the equivalent of an Aunt May figure for Miles, but to be honest, that would be doing her character a disservice. I really like Rio in this game. She was kinda bland in the first Insomniac Spider-Man game, but they really did her justice this time around. She's integral to Miles' hero journey and serves as one of the driving forces that pushes Miles further towards greatness. Rio asks us to put a record on. It is Christmas Day after all, and Christmas isn't Christmas without music. Upon entering Rio's room, there's an old case file on the floor, a case file for the Prowler. Obviously, if you're familiar with Miles Morales media, then of course you know the Prowler and who he is, and of course he makes an appearance in Miles' debut on the PS5. After putting your record of choice on, there's a knock at the door. Turns out Rio invited Miles' childhood friend, Finn, who he hasn't seen in years. Our first impression of Finn is that she's confident, friendly, likeable, and also quite intelligent as she fixes the doorbell to the apartment before entering. This intelligence is only then made more apparent when Miles and Finn reminisce on the energy converter they made that they won an award for. Finn is immediately painted to be an equal to Miles in many ways, and this is something that is intentionally done and something we will see more of as the game progresses. Alright, with my analysis out the way, I think it's time we let the characters enjoy their Christmas dinner, right? The scene showing all of the characters happy, laughing, and smiling as they celebrate, it's a really nice moment, and for many may remind them of happy times with their own family. After Miles' father died in the game, it must have been quite a difficult time in the Morales household, and so I'm sure the festivities of Christmas Day and having Finn and Genki there would have made the mood all the merrier. It's a very wholesome, heartwarming scene. Miles and Finn decided it's their task to wash up after dinner, and we have this really nice scene of the two of them actually getting some alone time and reflecting on how much has changed since they last saw each other. They agree to meet up tomorrow to hang out, just like the good old days, although it's alluded to that Finn is distant and something is bothering her. Same could be said for Miles. Moving to Harlem has been hard on him, on top of being the only Spider-Man in New York. This is another mirroring of their characters. They both have concerns that they won't tell each other about. We'll learn more about these internal struggles later. In the morning, Genki reveals that he's been working all night on a new app for the suit. This app is called the Friendly Neighbourhood Spider-Man app, and it becomes an integral part of tracking open world side missions and crime missions in your downtime. Swiping left on the touchpad opens this quest log, which is a nice addition to the way you track crime activities. It's sort of a little quality of life thing. In the previous game, if you were searching for crime activities in a district to 100% that district's crimes, you had to just swing around until one popped up on screen. In Miles Morales, you can bring up the FNSM app and you can just select crimes from the app's menu. It makes getting that 100% trophy so much quicker than the first game. Not only this, but it opens up the option of tracking side missions. Now, I'm not going to go into detail onto all of these side missions individually, but there are some really nice small stories out there that are worth playing. They pad out Miles' time as Spider-Man, but they also serve as extra relationship building between Miles and the people of the city. I do recommend going and doing these missions if you haven't already. They're nothing ridiculously exciting, but they are a nice little bit of fun, with some really wholesome side missions in there. We get a ping on the app from none other than Aaron Davis, Miles' uncle. Aaron has been mentioned before, and it's been established that him and Miles' dad had a bad relationship before Jefferson died, and that they never cleared the air. To be honest, this mission merely serves as a way to introduce the player to Aaron. It's not all that interesting, and it's not necessarily an event that spurs Miles forward in his hero's journey. We go to the train station, talk to Uncle Aaron, go to where the trains are, fight some underground men, fix the train alignment. This bit took me far too long the first time I did it for some reason. On stream, I just had no idea what the hell I was doing. Is this right? Oh, that's not good. Oh, that was good. Okay, that was good. That's not gonna be good. It's coming towards me. Yeah, bloody hell. Wait, what do you mean? I don't fully understand what I'm trying to do right now. Oh, fuck. Oh, I don't even want to be doing this. So boring. Every time George encounters a puzzle, his brain just turns to mush. Yeah, because there are always puzzles like this that are fucking boring, man. Like, don't get me wrong, I love, like, fucking puzzles in, like, Uncharted. I love puzzles in Portal. Games that are, like, meant to have fucking puzzles. But shit like this ain't fun. Moving trains about. It's boring as fuck. I don't give a shit about trains. Eat a dick. Yeah, to be honest, after watching that back, it's become painfully clear to me that I'm just a fucking idiot. The only significant thing that happens during this section is an introduction to gadget crafting. Collecting items called tech parts that are scattered in underground caches around the city, you can craft new gadgets or upgrades for existing gadgets. This works literally exactly the same as in the first game, and I still have the same criticism as I did with the first game. Instead of making me go around the map collecting tech parts to craft these gadgets, why not make it tied to the story instead? Have the hero create gadgets to counter certain enemies in the game. Then you can have upgrades for these gadgets require tech parts. I think it just goes a long way to include story reasons for things instead of just shoehorning them in for the sake of it. Similarly, instead of having to craft the suits in the game, I much prefer the suits that are actually worked into the story and awarded to you by completing side quests or challenges in the game. In my opinion, it's much more fun getting cool rewards from completing hard challenges instead of just swinging around the map and collecting parts to craft them. This would make trying to get certain suits and suit mods so much more engaging. Anyway, after finishing up at the train tracks, taking out some underground dudes and disarming some bombs, we return to Aaron, who reveals that he knows that we're Spider-Man. However, being the cool guy he is, obviously our secret's safe with him. I like Uncle Aaron. He's always got Miles back and looks after him from a distance. And this isn't the last we see of him. After some patrolling, we finally meet up with Finn to reminisce on old times. After all, it's been a while since Miles has seen Finn and they have a lot to catch up on. The two meet on a rooftop because they left a time capsule here when they were younger. This prompts a flashback that lets us learn a little bit more about Rick, Finn's older brother, a brilliant scientist who used to mentor the two before he went to work for Roxxon Energy. This flashback is a wholesome scene with the young and naive Miles and Finn bantering with Rick. This memory does seem like better days. Finn alludes to something being wrong regarding Rick, but she leaves before she tells Miles anything about it. Both Finn and Miles have secrets they're keeping from each other. Big secrets. This mission unlocks the time capsule's side content. These collectibles are similar to the backpacks from Spider-Man PS4, and I personally love collecting those. They offered exposition about Spider-Man and his already established time within the city. The first game takes place 8 years after Peter became Spider-Man after all. The time capsules in Miles Morales are like that, only they offer exposition on Miles and Finn's friendship. I really recommend collecting these after the game. They're really well done and definitely go a long way to flesh out Finn and Miles' history as friends. Anyways, it's time to head home. Rio has a rally tonight and she's running for a seat on the city council so that she can help the people of Harlem. It seems heroism runs in the family. The rally starts later in the evening, in the cold snows of New York City. I actually really enjoyed this section. Miles makes mention that he's still wearing his suit just in case, which shows that he's worried that something might happen. After all, the last time his father did a public speech, he ended up dying, so he keeps his suit on so that if he needs to defend his mother, he can. I don't know, this is just a nice small bit of detail for me, showing that even Spider-Man can have trauma. There are also lots of optional people to talk to and things to interact with, so it's a good idea to explore this area a bit before moving on. I think this game does optional dialogue really well. There's loads of really interesting random dialogue in this game. Even dialogue from the unnamed NPCs can be really interesting. Of course, it's kind of to be expected at this point, but the Underground hijacks the speech to turn it into their own agenda. They don't want Roxxon Plaza to open because Simon Krieger is a killer. This breaks into a fight between the Roxxon super soldiers and the Underground thugs. Fearing for his mother and Genki's life, Miles dons his mask and springs into action to fight the Underground. The event goes bad fast, with people running and screaming and Underground soldiers returning fire on the Roxxon soldiers. It's an all-out shootout. Miles takes care of the Underground dudes, but there's an explosion that comes from the other side of Harlem at Braithwaite Bridge. Upon arriving at the bridge, it seems like the plaza was just a warm-up. Roxxon soldiers and the Underground are gearing up for another fight. Now, I think it's a good time for me to mention that this is the event that spurs Miles forward in his hero's journey. This is his true spiritual teacher. As I said, this doesn't have to be an individual, but it can be a significant event that forces the hero to adapt. This bridge scene and everything that happens as a result is integral to Miles' hero journey, and I love this section so much. Miles tries his best to stop the conflict, but the leader of the Underground shows up, the Tinkerer. She kicks Miles out of the way and steals a canister of new form. Miles recovers and tries to wrestle it off her, but his bioelectricity reacts with the Tinkerer's suit, causing her mask to malfunction. It's here that it's revealed that the Tinkerer is Finn. But how has she gotten involved with a criminal organization, and why? What does she want with the new form? I like how at this point the game dangles all of these questions in front of you, but doesn't attempt to answer any of them. I'd imagine this is done intentionally. For this moment to be impactful, we need to be as confused as Miles is, and so Finn being the Tinkerer is dropped amongst all the chaos already happening in the rally. It's perfect. Miles' bioelectricity also destabilizes the new form, causing a massive explosion to rock the foundation of the bridge, meaning that it's going to fall and Miles needs to deal with the underground and save the people on the bridge before it all collapses into the water. This set piece here is so good. It's such an iconic example of Spider-Man conventions. A bridge collapsing over water, people stuck in their cars, buses falling off ledges, stuff like that. This moment forces Miles to become Spider-Man. In this very moment, he does everything he should and actually manages to save everyone on the bridge with no casualties. This is another example of Miles' potential as a hero, although once again, he caused most of the danger in the first place. If he hadn't been there to destabilize the new form, the bridge would have never collapsed, as that wasn't part of the Underground's plan. It's just like how in his enthusiasm, he let Rhino escape at the beginning. After saving the people and keeping the bridge intact, Miles takes a moment to collect his thoughts and catch his breath. Although it seems he's made some new enemies after the stunt he just pulled. Roxxon soldiers aim their guns at Miles and are just about to kill him when he turns invisible. Yeah, another one of Miles' unique powers is invisibility, which serves as another gameplay mechanic that differentiates Miles from Peter. After swinging away to safety, it becomes very obvious that Roxxon has it out for Spider-Man, and he's made some new enemies as a result of what's happened. This whole sequence with the rally and the bridge, and Miles' wake-up call that he needs to do better, and he needs to take his situation with the Underground seriously. This is the event that spurs Miles to become greater, to truly be Spider-Man. In the next scene, we join Miles and Ganke back at the apartment, and there are likely to be lots of thoughts flying through our hero's mind. Finn is the Tinkerer? Why did she steal the new form? Am I good enough to be Spider-Man? Is what happened with the bridge strictly my fault? I guess Peter would have been asking himself similar questions in his early days of being the webhead. At this point, Miles has no belief in himself, although this is about to change. Rio walks in and mentions that she's going to the campaign headquarters and asks the two lads if they need anything while she's out. Miles is shocked that she's still running because he fears her life is in danger and that she could die. After all, running for city council does paint a target on her back. This is where Miles realizes that giving up isn't an option. Rio tells him that in the Morales family, you don't give up, and you keep trying no matter how many times you get knocked down. Just like how his father gave his life protecting the people of New York from Martin Lee and the Devils. Ganke gives him some words of encouragement and he realizes that he has good people on his side. Rio and Ganke are two of the major motivators for Miles during his hero's journey, and although he made enemies as a result of the disaster at the bridge, he has strong allies in his mother and his friend. This is where Miles has the realization that currently he is New York's only Spider-Man, and that it's now or never. He needs to live up to that title, otherwise people will die. And so comes one of my favourite scenes in the game of Miles and Ganke designing the new suit. I like that Miles actually creates the black and red suit instead of having Peter do it, because I think every Spider-Man's rite of passage is creating their suit and making it their own, and Miles definitely adds his own flair to this suit. It's one of the coolest Spider-Man suits we've had in years, and definitely very iconic looking. This scene is Miles claiming his own identity as Spider-Man, and I think it's important that we remember that they are two different characters. Miles' Spider-Man is much different to Peter's, and I think this differentiation is absolutely fantastic. It's just a completely breath of fresh air to the character, and that's exactly why I love Miles so much. And with the creation of the suit, that is the end of Act 1. The first part to Miles' hero's journey is over. And so we move into Act 2, in which we discuss more themes of his progression into being a hero. Act 2 is the true meat of the hero's journey. This is where the character learns most of the lessons about what it is to be a hero through directly experiencing trials and tribulation. At the beginning of this act, our hero enters a new world and discovers their purpose. This new world doesn't have to be physically a new world. In this case, the new world Miles is entering is a New York overrun by the Underground and Roxxon, as well as all of the escaped Raft inmates. But also, this new world could be a metaphorical for Miles' new perspective on the world. I think at this point in the game, he no longer has that that doubt in himself that was lingering within him and is determined to get to the bottom of why Finn wants the new form and why she hates Simon Krieger, and so this newfound resolve after the Braithwaite Bridge incident could reflect Miles entering this new world. Of course, at the end of the last act, Miles got his iconic black and red suit, which symbolises him as his own Spider-Man. The suit is almost a living example of the metamorphosis that his character is currently undergoing. It's like he's finally found his footing as Spider-Man and has come to terms with his identity. Not fully, but he's getting there. Miles heads to Mason Repairs, Rick's old shop, to see if he can find any clues as to what Finn is doing and what her role as the Tinkerer is. After some exposition about Rick, Miles stumbles across a secret room, the Tinkerer's workshop. This part of the game is where the story really starts to ramp up. In my synopsis of the hero's journey at the beginning of the video I referenced, at the beginning of Act 2 is when the hero is approaching the belly of the beast, which references the hero getting closer to danger, and the discovery that Miles makes during this section is huge. On Finn's computer, there are 2 video files. The first one shows Finn and Rick planning to destroy the Nuform reactor in the Roxxon energy building. This is because the new form is making people sick, but Roxxon was covering it up so as to not get bad press. The new form is very dangerous. In the video you can see that Rick got ill because of his work on the new form project. Prolonged exposure to the new form causes life-threatening complications such as bone marrow decay. The second video shows Finn, but no Rick. Finn and Rick were trying to shut down the Nuform reactor in the Roxxon energy building. However, something went wrong, and it's up to Miles to find out exactly what. Now, before we continue recounting the story, I just want to take a second to talk about the stealth in this game. It is still a review after all. This section outside of Mason Repairs is a prime example of one of the many stealth sections in the game, and to be honest, I love the stealth in this game even more than I enjoyed the stealth in the first game. As I said earlier, I think Miles' abilities just feel more stealth oriented, and you can also easily drop in and out of stealth by using Miles' cloaking ability to evade thugs and soldiers. This means that you can even use Venom moves in stealth, because you can just go ahead and go back into stealth by activating invisibility. It's really cool. To be honest, I would have liked something like the impact web or web bombs so that we could reliably use more gadgets in stealth, but what we have is fine by me. There's something about the stealth that feels much more accessible in this game. I really think the cloaking feature does wonders for it. Right, going back to Miles, this point in the journey is known as the Road of Trial. This is where things start to get hard, where the toughest challenges begin. Miles' first challenge is to infiltrate the Roxxon energy facility to find Finn's phone. The phone has footage that holds the key to finding out why Finn is doing what she's doing, so this part is very important to the overarching narrative of the game. Upon climbing through a vent and making our way into the facility, Miles drops down and we are greeted by none other than the Prowler himself. Obviously, at this point, Miles has no idea that the Prowler is Uncle Aaron, so he attacks him. Aaron promptly reveals his identity and agrees to help Miles recover Finn's lost phone. I like this section with Uncle Aaron. I originally thought they were going to go down the Spider-Verse route, where Miles didn't know that the Prowler was Aaron, but I think Insomniac realised that everyone knows the Prowler's identity anyways, and that it's just better to get it out of the way instead of wasting time building up some sort of subplot. Aaron equips Miles with remote mines. Unlike Peter's proximity mines, these have to be detonated remotely, which makes them perfect for stealth. You can choose when they go off, and if you wait for the right moment, you can take out a few enemies at once with one of these bad boys. This area also introduces us to Roxxon soldiers as enemies. We haven't really gotten a chance to fight them yet, and god are they tough. If you've played the first Spider-Man game, then you will remember the Sable soldiers. The Roxxon dudes are like those enemies, but they hit much harder, and they can mute Miles' abilities for a while with their anti-venom tech. If you're playing on the harder difficulties, then these guys are going to violate you over and over and over again, so get ready. Just before collecting Finn's phone, the game lets us know that from here on out these Roxxon facilities will be their own side missions, which I really like. The demon hideouts and Fisk hideouts from the first game were great fun, and these are the same. They really seem to almost nail the side content in these games. After taking out all the guards in the Roxxon building, Miles drops down to collect Finn's phone. There's a video file on the device that tells us exactly why Finn became the Tinkerer and why she joined the Underground. The video shows Finn and Rick trying to shut down the Nuform reactor. All is going well until Krieger shows up on a screen and basically does the whole businessman bad guy talk, where he's all nonchalant and sarcastic. This results in the reactor blowing up and killing Rick in the process, all while Finn watches as her brother struggles to get free. I like that this scene gives more exposition on Rick, as he's a character we know very little about. He clearly cares about the people of New York because he cares more about saving them from the new form and its effects than he does about his prestigious job at Roxxon. Paints him to be a good person with a pure heart and a good role model for Finn. However, with the death of Rick, that role model is gone and Finn seems to be going down a dark path that she may not be able to come back from. We'll talk more directly about Finn and her motivations later, but for now we have the video. It's time to get out of here, but not before destroying the Nuform reactor, just like Rick wanted. This is where we realise how powerful Miles actually is. He absorbs all of the energy from the Nuform reactor, causing it to melt down. Nuform is a power source that is meant to power the entire city, with only a handful of reactors dotted in different districts. So theoretically, Miles just absorbed a huge portion of the energy that it takes to power an entire district of New York. It's safe to say that Miles is incredibly strong and durable. The energy inside him builds up until he can't hold it in anymore. He explodes into a burst of bioelectricity, which causes the phone's battery to die for good this time, meaning that the evidence that was once on that phone is now lost completely. Again, this sort of continues that theme of Miles messing things up unintentionally. If he hadn't insisted on destroying the Nuform reactor there and then the phone wouldn't have been damaged and Krieger could be locked away. But instead, now we're back to square one. Although at least Rick's final wishes were carried out, so not all was bad. This next bit is really cool combat section in which Spider-Man and Prowler team up to take down the Roxxon guys. It's cool because during this fight, any finishes you perform will be team takedowns where both Miles and Aaron just wail on some poor defenseless Roxxon soldier. You can spend as much time in this room as you want taking out enemies. I'm pretty sure they endlessly spawn until you leave the facility. Of course, this was my second playthrough of the game, so I just wanted to get the gameplay so I could write this video, so I left almost immediately, although you can stay as long as you want and see how high of a combo you can get. After web zipping through the hole, we find ourselves on a train in the subway, roaring through the tunnels underneath New York. This here is a really nice scene that gives us some exposition on Aaron and Jefferson's relationship before he died. Aaron talks about how he revealed his identity to his brother and expected him to understand. He expected that Jefferson would have his back, but instead he cut him out. There's this one line from Uncle Aaron that is delivered really well. If I kept my mouth shut, maybe I'd still have a family. The pain in his voice and face is so apparent, especially considering he never got to repair his relationship with his brother before he died. He tells Miles to approach Finn as a friend and not as Spider-Man, so that he can infiltrate the underground base and steal back the Nuform. He wants Miles to lie to Finn's face, which in turn could potentially cause a serious strain on Finn and Miles' relationship. Aaron grapples off of the train. I don't know where exactly he goes, he just grapples straight upwards, and it's quite a dramatic exit, so I'll let it slide. This leaves Miles alone on the train with nothing but his thoughts and a new mission: getting into the underground hideout. This section of Miles' story is known in the hero's journey template as the ordeal, which is usually a painful experience. Whilst not necessarily physically painful for Spider-Man, the climax of this section certainly does yield emotional pain for Miles, but we'll talk about that later on. Miles meets Finn for a coffee to talk about the things that have been bothering them. Remember, this is a theme that has run throughout all of their encounters and really mirrors their stories and experiences. Miles reveals that he went to the Mason repairs shop and snooped around, ultimately finding out about what happened to Rick. This is the first time that Finn is directly confronted about Rick's death, and you can see the pain that it has caused her. Miles also tells her that he knows she is the Tinkerer, but obviously he leaves out the part about being Spider-Man because he needs her trust so he can steal the Nuform. This plan is very uncharacteristically deceptive for Miles, but let's remember it was put into Miles' head by Aaron, a man who based his whole career on deception. I think this ordeal section of Miles' hero's journey is about him learning that he needs to make decisions for himself and not to let others cloud his judgment. Miles tells Finn that he wants to help her and that he feels as if he's been pushing her away. I mean, he is Spider-Man after all, and pushing away the people that are close to him is a necessary convention of Spider-Man as a concept. The struggle of managing two lives at once is paramount. Finn agrees to let Miles help her, and she takes him to the underground base, which is located in the Old Fist Tower. Miles proves himself by jumping off a crane. For some reason, that's the rite of passage of getting into the underground. I don't know why. It's a bit of a strange one. And then him and Finn make their way inside the building where all the gang activity goes down. Upon entering, Finn leaves Miles to settle in, which is the perfect time to start snooping around. searching for the new form. After interacting with some of the people and objects in the area, a door opens up that allows us to go out into one of the balconies overlooking the main lobby area of the building. Finn comes back and Miles tells her that he needs to get home. Rio's arm's in a cast and he needs to help her with dinner. Obviously, this is a complete lie, but Spider-Man wouldn't be Spider-Man if he also didn't spin webs of white lies to keep his identity safe. After Finn leaves, Miles takes the opportunity to change into his spider suit so that he can explore without the risk of being caught. We enter a new arena now in which we have to take out some more underground enemies. You can either do this in stealth or just all out combat, it's up to you. Although stealth may be a good option considering we got those new remote mines from Aaron in the last mission. They really come in handy. After making short work of those guys, we activate one of the statues in the room which opens up a secret passage into the vault. We find Finn down there speaking to her soldiers. Obviously, Miles can go invisible, so it's not much trouble for him. It's revealed here that they moved the new form. They also aren't sure if the canister's safe. Miles' bioelectricity has destabilized the canister. His powers mess with the structure of the new form. On the table is a map of underground hideouts spread across the city. At least one of them has to contain the new form. Miles gets a closer look at the map so that Ganke can narrow down the location. This leads to a pretty funny scene with one of those classic Spider-Man conventions where his hand gets stuck to an object and he can't get it off. In this section he's invisible, so he has to play it off as if it's nothing, which is quite funny. After successfully finding out where the new form is, Miles drops from the ceiling and is promptly seen by a guard that just happens to be passing through the area. This guard is wielding the programmable matter sword from earlier, and god, these sword-wielding acrobatic madmen hit hard. These are by far some of the most annoying enemies in the game. They're similar to the sword-wielding demons from the first game. At least Miles has Venom Dash that can easily stun these guys, meaning you can unleash a flurry of attacks on them and hope to god they're knocked out before the Venom stun wears off, because when these guys are mobile, they're so quick and they'll fuck your shit up. After defeating the underground dudes, Ganke is able to pin down the location of the new form. It's at the Gem Theatre, so that's our next stop. Additionally, this mission unlocks underground hideouts, which is pretty much the same concept as the Roxxon labs scattered across the map. They're a really fun side activity and offers some fun mission challenges. I really enjoyed doing these and I actually wish there was more of them. The reward for completing all of the Roxxon labs and underground facilities is the programmable matter suit, which I actually am a massive fan of. I don't know what it is, but this suit just looks so cool when you're swinging around the city. Plus they give it an actual story reason for existing. Finn was developing a new form of programmable matter that you see her mask is made of. Miles simply reverse engineers this and makes a suit out of it. It looks great in my opinion. After finding the Gem Theatre, disabling the generators powering the electricity field that covers the entrance and letting ourselves inside, we find the new form within an armoured container. It's here that we find out exactly what Finn is planning to do. She's pumping energy into the new form, which is destabilising it even further. But what's worse, she plans on dropping this destabilized new form onto Roxxon Plaza. Granted, the plaza isn't open yet, so technically there would be no casualties, but Miles is right in thinking that this isn't worth the risk, even if it supposedly won't kill anyone. Finn is operating on passion, and so she isn't taking into consideration the potential dangers of her plan. She's blinded by her hatred of Roxxon as a result of the death of Rick, that she clearly isn't thinking in an empathetic way. She just wants to see Roxxon burn. Just as Miles is about to take the new form, a whole cohort of underground goons show up, which means we have to make short work of them. This is a pretty fun stealth section, although I feel as if there was no need to shoehorn enemies into this bit. It cuts up the pacing of this whole section and just feels to me like needless padding, although that is just me nitpicking at this point. This bit does introduce us to our last new enemy type in the game, the shielded underground brute with a massive purple sledgehammer. These enemies look tough, but to be honest, they aren't all that. Miles' venom abilities are so OP that you can just smash this guy around with little to no effort, especially considering you could destroy his shield and then just go crazy on him. Anyways, after finally defeating these guys, Miles is just about to take the canister when Finn herself shows up and takes the new form herself. This leads to a really cool set piece chase through the city with Finn leaping from buildings and Miles swinging just a few seconds behind. I think Insomniac are brilliant at these set piece sections and they mastered them in this game. It just feels so cinematic chasing Finn as you tear through the city. Finally, the chase comes to an end when Finn grabs Miles and slams him down onto the building, incapacitating him. Finn stands over Miles and is just about to end his life when he lifts up his mask and reveals his identity. Finn steps back, hurt that Miles has lied to her, and when Miles looks away, she seemingly disappears. You know, that classic superhero trope. That whole chase section was Miles' ordeal. He hasn't necessarily been hurt that badly physically, but emotionally he must feel very guilty about lying to Finn, especially because he knows why she's doing what she's doing. In her mind, what she is doing is completely right even if it isn't in reality. And in her world, Miles lied to her and tried to foil her revenge plot, which most likely is the most important thing in her life. She has no family anymore, only the will for revenge, and she will stop at nothing to carry out her plan. At this point, all of Finn and Miles' cards are laid on the table. They both know each other's secret identity, and they both know that they are opposed to each other in some way or another. This is where the mirroring of their characters becomes ever more apparent. Both Finn and Miles have lost someone very close to them. Miles lost his dad and Finn lost her brother, although their individual reactions to these situations are very different. As a result of the death of Jefferson Davis, Miles became Spider-Man, swore to protect people of the city like his father did, whereas as a result of the death of Rick Mason, Finn became the Tinkerer and swore to take down Roxxon even if that means potentially hurting innocents along the way. Finn is the antithesis of Miles, as she went down the complete opposite road that Miles did as a result of her trauma, which is why the parallels between Miles and Finn are so interesting in this game. This next section deals with the part of the hero's journey known as the temptation. Naturally, temptation can be a multitude of things, but in Miles' case it refers to his forbidden friendship with his uncle Aaron, the Prowler. It's been established that Aaron was shunned from the family, and Miles is the only one that really kept a connection with him. Rio shows this taste for him at the beginning of the game if you play his record too. The temptation in the hero's journey is always there strictly to distract the hero from their task and take them off the path of the main journey. This is present in most scenes with Uncle Aaron. Miles trusts him, but he usually ends up distracting Miles or compromising his goal in some way, whether it be telling Miles to flee during the Roxxon vs Underground fight on Braithwaite Bridge, or telling him to lie to Finn, which in turn just made it more difficult for Miles to reach out to her. Uncle Aaron always hinders Miles' journey in some way, whether intentionally or not. We'll see more of this as the game progresses, and I'll highlight those key moments when we get to them. This one in particular seems to be one of the more genuine, heartfelt scenes with Uncle Aaron, where him and Miles reminisce on Jefferson and how they used to mix beats and make music when they were younger. This is a side of Aaron that is quite rare to see in this game. That isn't to say this is the only instance of Aaron being actually genuine with Miles. He gives Miles a USB drive with a mixtape that him and Miles' father were working on before things went bad between them, and he asks Miles if he wants to finish it for old time's sake, just like him and Jefferson used to. It's actually a really touching sentiment. Anyway, this introduces us to the sound sample side activity, which is one of the weirder ones to be honest. You go around the city and activate this sampling menu, and you have to walk around a set area, looking at the right objects from the right distance and then sampling the sound. Yeah, it's a bit of an odd side activity and I wasn't really a fan of these. At the end you get to mix the sounds into a song and it's fucking mental. Yeah, it's a really bad song, but I appreciate the effort. The real reason to do these side missions is the exposition about Uncle Aaron they offer, if you're into that sort of thing. When you complete one of the sound samples, you get a message from Aaron, and he explains a little bit more about his relationship with Miles' father and how exactly it went sour. It's really interesting, and I recommend these activities for this reason only. Going back to this first sound sample at the docks with Uncle Aaron, after completing it, Miles and Aaron talk about Jefferson some more, and Aaron tells Miles of his concerns for his nephew, because there's a target on his back now that he's Spider-Man. The conversation switches to Finn. Miles feels as if he needs to set things straight with her, to apologise for lying, and to try to talk her out of blowing up Roxxon Plaza. He plans to meet her at Trinity Church. After Miles swings away, it's revealed that Uncle Aaron is feeding information to someone and tells them that Miles is meeting the Tinkerer at Trinity Church, and that they can take the Tinkerer, but they have to leave Miles alone. This is another example of Miles' trust in his uncle being abused, because the bond that Miles has with Uncle Aaron is the temptation of the hero's journey. I really like this next scene. It's a prime example of the mirroring of Miles as Spider-Man and Finn as the Tinkerer. Finn asks Miles to look the other way regarding her plan, but he refuses as he made a promise to keep New York safe, not only for Peter, but also in memory of his father. Although Finn too made a promise that she would get revenge for Rick's death, but this was only a promise she made to herself in her grief, and unlike Miles, her promise will inevitably kill people, which is not what Rick would want at all. This topic is sort of shoved to the side for now, although it is something that will build up again later for sure. Finn asks Miles why he picked Trinity Church, and he mentions they watched a concert there once when they were younger. Appealing to these memories brings out the side of Finn that we see at the beginning, instead of this broken and vengeful version of her that gets ever more prevalent as the game progresses. The good side of Finn is still in there, but she is very clouded by the grief of losing Rick, that she's mostly lost all sense at this point. You can hardly blame her though, where Miles had Peter, Rio, Genki and MJ to fall back on after his father died during the events of the first game. Finn had nobody at all except for Miles, and even he ended up being against her. It's quite a tragic story when you think about it, and so you can hardly blame Finn for her outlook during this point in the game. After laughing and joking about the past, Miles' spider sense kicks in, and Rhino jumps out of a Roxxon helicopter and jumps down onto the church. He grabs Finn and drags her down onto the ground. You may notice that Rhino's wearing red armor, similar to that of the Roxxon guards, and that's because Simon Krieger has fitted him with the new anti-venom suit, and is using him as a mercenary to do his dirty work. You might remember Roxxon arriving just after we fought Rhino at the beginning of the game. They didn't turn him over to the authorities. Krieger kept him as a pet so he could use him later down the line. With Miles shocked that his venom didn't work out this time, Rhino overpowers him and smashes him into the ground. And the screen goes black. Miles wakes up dazed and confused, strapped to a chair. As he looks up, it's very apparent who's sitting in front of him. Simon Krieger. It was pretty evident from the beginning that Krieger was going to be a bad guy. He just has that bad guy face. But this is the first time he actually goes all out evil corporate man on Miles. Overall, Krieger isn't that interesting as a character, to be honest. His only motivator in this is money and ego. There's no interesting or nuanced reason as to why he's doing what he's doing, which I'm not a massive fan of, but he serves a purpose, and as I said earlier, there isn't really a main protagonist of this game, only setbacks that Miles has to overcome. During this scene, Krieger gives all the spiel about making money and how Nuform needs to be used and all that stuff. To be honest with you, I really didn't care about anything he had to say because there really is no weight to his character. He's just a random white dude who wants money. Although that's not to say Troy Baker didn't do a great job playing Krieger. He did the best he could with an ultimately uninteresting character. Krieger basically sits there for a while taunting Miles and Finn, but ends up getting frustrated because Finn mentions how Rick did all the work on Nuform and he just puts his name on it, which is ultimately true, so Finn hit a nerve there. After some more waffling, Krieger leaves and instructs his guards to use Miles as a way to draw the location of the Nuform out of Finn. I don't know why he did this in retrospect, because Krieger doesn't know Miles' identity, so how would he know that Finn would break as a result of having to watch Miles get beaten? After all, not only was Miles fighting the Tinkerer on the bridge in public, but he also chased her through the city only a few days previous. The guards approach Miles with electric batons and just start wailing on him. This is actually a pretty intense scene to watch, because at the end of the day, it's like a 17-year-old boy strapped to a chair being beaten senseless by super soldiers with electric batons. The pain Miles is in is reflected through his powers going haywire and flickering on and off repeatedly, like a broken light switch. Although it was kind of stupid of them to decide it was a good idea to use electric batons on an individual that can absorb electricity and use it against them. After being beaten and tormented, Miles releases a bioelectric explosion, much like the one from the Roxxon labs just after Miles had absorbed the energy of the Nuform. This unlocks a new Venom ability, Mega Venom Blast, which I have to say is pretty useful in a pinch. The explosion freed Finn from her binds too, meaning that now it's time for Finn and Miles to team up to escape the Roxxon facility. I really enjoyed this mission. Seeing Finn and Miles not at odds and just being superheroes together is really cool, and it gives us a chance to properly see how close they are as friends. They really do have each other's backs. This mission has it all: stealth, puzzles, combat. It's got everything. In my eyes, this is such a good Spider-Man mission. Yeah, on a replay it isn't nearly as enjoyable as the first time, but who cares, this is a great mission. During the process of escaping, Miles and Finn stumble across Krieger, Rhino, and none other than the Prowler. He's been working with Roxxon, and he's the one that tipped them off about the location of Finn and Miles when they were meeting at Trinity Church. Obviously, he did specify to leave Miles alone, but let's be honest, any villain would be stupid to leave Spider-Man alive when you're doing evil stuff. Even though Aaron thought he was doing the right thing and protecting his nephew, all he has done is clip his wings once again. Aaron threatens to go public with all of Roxxon's shady business if Krieger doesn't release Miles, but he's backed into a corner when Krieger tells him that he will be linked to all the crimes anyway, and so Aaron rolls over and agrees to reclaim the new form in exchange for Miles' freedom. Little does he know that Miles doesn't need his help. This next section is a small puzzle in which you have to link some wires together, move a crane around, and throw an electrically powered engine into a window to blow it up, which reveals an escape route. I actually really like this section because Miles and Finn return to the topic of their conflict of interests, and Miles once again tries to convince her not to blow up Roxxon Plaza, but once again, Finn doesn't budge, as this is all she has left. In the end, Miles just vows to stop her if she doesn't change her mind. After opening the escape route and fighting some more guards, we find ourselves right at the entrance of the Roxxon building, but before leaving, Miles and Finn snoop around and end up finding a whole computer full of incriminating evidence on Simon Krieger that would definitely get him locked up for good. This is it. This is what they need so that Finn can get her revenge in an ethical way, and Miles can protect the people of New York. This evidence is even more incriminating than the evidence that was on Finn's phone, so downloading this is paramount to making sure everything goes smoothly. Of course, everything doesn't go smoothly, as Rhino bursts through the door and smashes into Miles, which breaks out into a fight. The Rhino boss fight is actually pretty fun. The fight mainly consists of either throwing electric bombs at Rhino or dodging his charge and ramming him into nearby obstacles, all whilst fighting endless spawning heavily armoured Roxxon soldiers. This fight can be a massive challenge as you're always dodging and avoiding all sorts of different attacks with very little downtime. You just whittle Rhino's health down by stripping him of his anti-venom armour so that finally you can come in and Venom stun him to claim the win. On spectacular difficulty, this boss is fucking ridiculously hard because all the enemies are so OP on that difficulty, so play the game on spectacular at your own discretion. After defeating Rhino, Miles instructs Finn to stay with Rhino whilst he goes and gets a better look at the files on the computer they found just before Rhino burst in. All seems to be going well. Krieger's data is sure to take down Roxxon. This is where things start to get rocky. Rhino begins taunting Finn about the death of Rick, and he knows exactly which buttons to press to elicit a reaction from her. You can tell how much it's getting to her, and rightly so. If someone was taunting you about your dearly loved recently dead relative, I'm sure it would get to you too. On top of this, Rhino really drives home this emotional manipulation by saying Krieger told him it was her fault. Obviously we know that's not true. It was both Rick and Finn's agreed decision to try to destroy the New Form project, but because she's the only one that survived, she must have an unbearable amount of survivor's guilt, and most likely would blame herself for the death of her brother because she couldn't do anything to stop it. Going back to Miles, he makes quite an important discovery at this moment. Krieger's files reveal that he overloaded the New Form reactor to meet his deadline, meaning it's dangerously supercharged, and if Finn carries out her plan, the New Form bomb will completely wipe out Harlem and everyone living there. The lives of everyone at this point are truly at stake, and with Finn becoming more unstable, Miles is the only one that can save New York. Rhino continues to taunt Finn, and she breaks easily due to her deteriorated mental state. She draws her sword and plunges it into Rhino's chest. Miles rushes back to stop her. Of course, Spider-Man has the no killing rule, so if Rhino died on his watch, it would be a direct breach of one of the few rules that are important to being Spider-Man. Miles and Finn smash through the wall and into a part of the subway. In her emotional state, Finn turns on Miles. At this point, Finn is so overcome by a sense of grief that her moral compass is completely off kilter. She really has lost all sense of herself at this point, especially after she attacks Miles and beats him relentlessly. The last words we hear from Finn are that if Miles gets in her way again, she'll kill him. And with that, she walks away into the darkness, and Miles calls Ganke for help. The next scene is really touching, and it also means a lot for the development of Miles as a character. Ganke helps Miles back home and he carries him in. Ganke really is a true friend. He somehow got down into the subway, collected Miles, and carried him all the way back to his apartment with no one finding out his identity, all whilst Miles was badly battered and bruised. I wish I had a friend like Ganke. Of course, this scene deals with Rio finding out that Miles is Spider-Man. She finds Miles up against the wall, hurt. but she takes a step back when she sees what he's wearing. Although of course I doubt Miles cares because he nearly just got beat to death by his ex-best friend. Miles explains everything about Finn's plan and rocks on to Rio, and they have this really nice bit of dialogue where Rio expresses the same worry for Miles that Miles had for her at the beginning of the game after the bridge incident. She even says the same line, "You could have died." But of course, the Morales family doesn't give up, and Rio understands Miles' responsibility, just like she understood his dad's responsibility when he used to protect the people of New York in the NYPD. Even during this scene, the picture of Jefferson Davis slowly comes into shot in the background, almost signifying that Miles' dad is always with him. What makes this scene even more touching is that Miles says, "I'm just a guy who doesn't give up," which is exactly the line that Miles' dad says to Peter in the first game. I love this progression of Miles' character, and that not only does he reflect Peter in his younger years as Spider-Man, but he also reflects his father and the good man he once was. This scene shows that whereas Peter keeps his identity secret to those around him, Miles actually benefits from the support of Rio and Genki. His mother's belief in him just gives him that confidence to get back out there and stop Finn once and for all. Rio is working with Feast to evacuate the people from Harlem in case anything does go badly with Finn. It isn't worth the risk of letting everyone stay home because if that bomb goes off, it wipes out the entirety of Harlem. Finn is at the Oscorp Science Center. She needs one last thing to fully destabilize the new form, the energy converter that her and Miles made back when they were in middle school. So that's our next destination. It's a race against time. Miles thanks Genki for always having his back, and the game gives us one last opportunity to look at the apartment before heading off for Finn. On the way to the Oscorp Science Center to find Finn and stop her from destroying Harlem, Miles' progress is halted once again by, you guessed it, Uncle Aaron. As you're swinging towards the Science Center, he shoots a beam which incapacitates Miles, meaning we've been captured. Again. Miles wakes up in a room with an electrical barrier stopping him from escaping. Aaron himself shows up and explains to Miles that he won't let him back out until the business with Krieger and Finn is done. He believes Miles is going to get himself killed, but of course, Miles would always rather die trying than save himself. That's just not what Spider-Man does. Aaron has clearly made a massive misjudgment regarding the safety of his nephew, so much so that he is directly putting him in danger. If Miles doesn't get to Finn, then she will blow up Harlem. At this point, Aaron has become completely delusional, which means Miles is forced to fight him. The Prowler boss fight is actually really good too. It's fast, intense, but satisfying when you get some hits in. The key to this fight is dodging Prowler's attacks and then shorting his cloaking device by using Venom's stun abilities. This opens him up for attacks. As you do more damage, he starts using different moves and cloaks way more often, but it's nothing that isn't manageable if you time your dodges right. You can actually stun lock him for a little while if you just keep quick switching between normal attacks and Venom stuns. Doing this makes the fight almost trivially easy, but I still enjoy it nonetheless. I'm pretty sure this is the first time you get to actually fight Prowler in any Spider-Man game, and it's definitely a really cool fight, so I'm happy with it. After the fight, Miles webs Aaron down, and he admits that he was wrong, and apologizes to Miles, expecting forgiveness because after all, they're family. Although, being family isn't enough anymore, after Aaron has lied to, manipulated, and now fought Miles. You can tell how hurt Miles is in this scene. He trusted his uncle, almost like he's clinging on to the only memory of his father he has left. It's a shame that things had to go the way they did with Aaron, because I really think that he could have been a good role model for Miles, but Aaron's own personal grief of losing his brother got in the way, and he wasn't able to see that he needs to let Miles make his own way in the world. Aaron confesses his concerns that their relationship is going down the same path that his and Jefferson's did, and that he doesn't want to repeat history. Although, Miles can't be the person Aaron wants to turn him into, and he can't turn his back on the people that need him. He needs to be better. And with that, the temptation of the hero's journey is no longer a threat to Miles' journey. He overcame the manipulation from Uncle Aaron, and he's much stronger for it. Now, this section is the beginning of the end of the game. There really isn't much left beyond this point. After fighting Aaron, we can finally head to the Oscorp Science Center, where hopefully we will find Finn, along with the destabilized new form that she plans on using to blow up Roxxon Plaza. However, before going inside, we have a stealth section. This one I actually really like because there's lots of ledges and objects you can use to distract the underground thugs. I think it's a perfect way to round off the stealth in this game, as there's no more stealth sections linked to the main story from here on out. So savor it if you enjoy this game's stealth. After beating the underground posted outside the science center, we deactivate the electric field that blocks the entrance and head inside for a trip down memory lane. This was the last place Finn and Miles were truly happy together, in the innocence of their childhood. Since coming to the Oscorp Science Center and displaying their energy converter, both Miles and Finn's lives have changed drastically, for better and for worse, so it must be pretty bittersweet for Miles to come back here. Walking through the doors to where the exhibits were being held prompts a flashback, and we go back to the day that Miles and Finn were here, excited to see their work displayed in an official museum, and excited about the direction their lives were just about to go in. This flashback section is a really nice change of pace, focusing on Miles and Finn long before they became the Tinkerer or Spider-Man. They're just two happy kids, ready to enter the world of high school. This section has a ton of interesting little interactable items and objects scattered around, which offer some funny moments and conversations from Finn and Miles, as well as a small mini game that you can play, which is pretty fun too. In this section, you can also bump into Peter and Dr. Octavius from the first game, and when Peter comes on screen, it plays a small excerpt from his character theme, which is a really nice bit of attention to detail. This little bit of optional dialogue has Peter and Doc Ock discuss the neural interface that they eventually develop halfway through the first game. Pete also has to mysteriously get going because there's an emergency. I really like this subtle nod to him being Spider-Man, but from the perspective of someone else. This use of dramatic irony goes a long way, and I really like how even when you're not playing as him, Peter is still having that struggle of leading a double life. Anyway, Miles and Finn need a way to get into the exhibit that displays their energy converter. However, they need tickets to get in, so they're going to have to use more unconventional means. The lock on the door to the exhibit is deactivated by shining a light directly into it, so using their intelligence, Miles and Finn borrowed some items from around the exhibit and made their way through the door so that they could see the energy converter on display. Upon reaching the display, who else shows up but Rick, who actually decided to buy a ticket. Rick suggests they take a picture to capture the moment, and the three of them huddle up and smile. This is the picture from the time capsule at the beginning of the game. At this point, we realise how much has changed between Miles and Finn since these good times. Finally, Miles is seconds away from stabilising and taking the new form when Finn shows up and takes it back. Miles is just about to tell her about the bomb when more underground thugs show up and we're forced into another fight. Kinda wish this fight wasn't here. It completely cuts up the pacing of this final section, and it really feels shoehorned in for the sake of padding, but it's not that bad. After defeating the underground and leaving the Oscorp Science Center, Miles is back on the search for Finn, but it's obvious where she's headed. Roxxon Plaza. This is it, the beginning of the final showdown, the climax of the hero's journey. This is where the hero faces the foe that has eluded them for the entire journey. In Miles' case, this foe is Finn, or as she is more recognisable as now, the Tinkerer. Our hero arrives in Harlem amidst a raging snowstorm. You may have noticed that as the game progresses, New York becomes more covered in snow, and the snowfall becomes heavier the closer you get to the end. It's a nice addition. Miles tries to call Genki, but he gets no answer. The snowstorm is most likely blocking the signal. Raging alongside the snowstorm is a battle in the streets of Harlem between the underground thugs and the Roxxon soldiers. It's pretty much an all-out war zone at this point. This entire next section is a very long and intense combat sequence that has you going from area to area, fighting all types of different enemies. I really like this part because the game throws everything it's got at you, and you're forced to use all of Miles' abilities and equipment to defeat the enemies in these areas. It's almost like a victory lap, to use all of the abilities you unlocked after playing the story and side missions, and investing the time into upgrading your suit and selecting suit mods. This section really shows off the combat mechanics in this game, and it makes sense from a story aspect too, because Miles is at his strongest and that disbelief in himself from the beginning of the game has been replaced by an instinct to do the right thing and stop Finn, even if that means destroying their friendship in the process. After stopping most of the fighting, Miles meets back up with Rio, Genki, and a few civilians that must not have been successfully evacuated. However, there's no time to get them to safety as Finn has already started. Suddenly, one of the Roxxon soldiers in the background gets up and aims his weapon at Miles. But lo and behold, none other than the Prowler comes in to save him. Yeah, I like this redemption for Uncle Aaron after his mistakes during the events of the game. Much like Finn, Aaron is grieving still after the death of his brother, and he's just trying to prevent the only piece of Jefferson he has left from being harmed. Miles. If this redemption is a little too sudden for you, I recommend doing the sound sample side missions. As I said, they give a great background on Uncle Aaron. He's not such a bad guy. This is a theme throughout the game. Superheroes that are grieving and doing what they think is right even if it isn't. It shows that after all, even under the armor or tight spandex, they're just human. And humans do terrible things when under the influence of grief. Aaron helps get Rio, Genki and the others back to safety, and Miles goes to fulfill his journey as a hero. To face Finn one last time. We join Finn as she's slotting the destabilized new form into the critically overcharged new form reactor. Just as she locks it in, Miles swings over to her to try and explain the severity of what she's doing. As we know, Krieger changed the specs. She isn't just going to destroy Roxxon Plaza, she's going to completely vaporize all of Harlem. Of course, Finn doesn't believe Miles, as she's past the point of no return. In her rage, Finn throws Miles towards the building, punches him through the air, and then throws him off. Of course, Miles isn't going to be put down that easily, and so it's time to fight. Miles and Finn are at a standstill. They size each other up preparing to fight. The entirety of Miles' hero's journey has been leading to this, and at this point everything is at stake. If Miles doesn't beat Finn now, Harlem is wiped off the map completely. And so the two heroes charge at each other, and we begin the final boss of the game. The Tinkerer boss fight is so good. I cannot stress enough how much I enjoyed this fight. It's just so expertly designed. A complaint of the bosses in the first game was that they were too easy and didn't have recognizable attack patterns that required the players to dodge at the right time, so Insomniac's answer to these problems was the bosses we've seen in this game, especially this one. Unlike a lot of bosses in the first game, Finn actually has multiple phases, recognizable attack patterns, and most of her combos can be countered if you dodge at the right time and punish. Not to mention how cinematic this fight also manages to be, alongside this functionality. I think this is the best boss we've had so far in Spider-Man, and I like this one even more than the final boss of Spider-Man 1. It's just so damn good. On top of all of this, the emotional weight of this fight is very significant, as we know that both Miles and Finn were once very good friends, but instead had to throw it away. This fight also has the moment where Miles finally acknowledges himself as Spider-Man. A lot of people found this line sort of cringe. The delivery wasn't top-notch, but I still liked this bit nonetheless. After a grueling battle, Finn realizes just exactly what she's done. She wants to take it back, but it's too late for that. The building crumbles and Finn falls down and Miles jumps down to save her. After taking the full brunt of the fall, Miles awakes in front of the new form reactor, and things don't look good. Finn is unconscious and the new form reactor looks like it's about to explode, and Finn's plan to avenge her dead brother will come at the cost of Harlem. However, to complete the final act of his journey, our hero must press on. After everything he's been through, Miles stumbles towards the reactor, presses his hands on it, and absorbs all of the energy inside. Of course, this energy is far too much for Miles to hang on to on his own. He will eventually have to release it too. He's only delayed the inevitable. However, Finn has seen this moment before. She remembers watching Rick helplessly in front of the new film reactor as he attempted to shut it off, and this time she wasn't powerless to do anything. And so she steps up to fix what she's done. She hoists Miles over her shoulder, runs up the side of the Roxxon Energy skyscraper, and jumps high enough into the clouds so that the explosion won't harm anyone. Well, it won't harm anyone but her. As the two soar into the clouds, Miles protests against Finn's plan, but this is clearly what she wants. This final act is a redemption for Finn. She realised there was no coming back from what she had done, so saving Miles was her paying the price for it. This, of course, is the resurrection of our hero. When he returns to the ground, his world will be a very different one. He saved Harlem, but he lost his best friend too. Miles falls back down to the wreckage of Roxxon Plaza, and Rio, Genki and the others run over to him to see if he's okay. He is, of course, but the same cannot be said for Finn. People gather around, and Genki returns the mask to Rio. She puts the mask back on him and helps him up, and he takes his place as Spider-Man. Not the Friendly Neighbourhood Spider-Man, but Harlem's Spider-Man. The police and the media begin to show up, and one of the reporters asks one of the civilians if they saw his face. But in this really touching moment, all of these people defend Miles' identity even though they now know who he is. At the beginning of the video I made a point about the key to being Spider-Man is to win over the hearts of those that you're defending, and I think by this point Miles has done that for the people of Harlem, as they now refer to him as our Spider-Man. And with that, Miles swings away, and this act of the hero's journey has come to an end. Now we move into Act 3, where the hero returns triumphant and changed after their journey. We meet Miles 4 weeks after the final showdown at Roxxon, and Simon Krieger has been successfully arrested, and the people of Harlem couldn't be more thankful for their Spider-Man. You may notice they've added him to the mural that we saw at the beginning. Miles is happy and confident in himself, and he seems to be comfortable not only as Miles, but as Spider-Man too. Miles has successfully become the master of two worlds, and has fought for his freedom, and the freedom of the people of Harlem. Miles meets Peter on a rooftop, and they discuss what it is to be Spider-Man, and that it's not just their duty to stop these villains, but to also make sure that they can't get away with it. It's really nice to see Miles and Peter as both of their fully established versions of Spider-Man together, both in their new suits. I can't wait to see what the future of this series is going to hold. And with that, our two Spider-Men swing off into the city side by side, and so concludes this hero's journey. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, it's a very long video, so if you've made it to this point in the end, thank you so much for watching the entirety of the video. It means a lot to me. Spider-Man Miles Morales is a pretty special game to me, considering Spider-Man is a very special character to me, and I wanted to get this video right and do a proper analysis of the game. I was originally going to make this video like half an hour long, and then as I wrote more, it just turned out that there's far too much in this game to talk about, so I had to do it all. Thanks for your patience. I know it's been a long time since I last released a video, and there's going to be way more videos and streams moving forward, but for some reason this project took me so long, but I've learned a lot from it, and I'm ready to move on to more projects in the future that are of this length. I'd actually love one day to do a video of this type on the first Spider-Man game, because I actually did do a review of Spider-Man PS4 when it came out, and it doesn't do justice to the game. It's like 14 minutes long or so, it's something like that, and it just isn't a very great review for the game. So I'd love to take that on in the future, possibly before the next Spider-Man game comes out, because the future of this franchise is absolutely crazy with this universe they've set up now with Miles and Peter. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I put a lot of work into this video, and I hope it pays off, so I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one.